Welcome you all. Thank you for joining us for this lecture organized by Center for Heritage Management at Amrit Modi School of Management. And thank you, Lady Kishwar Desai, for accepting our invitation for this talk. I'll give a short introduction. It's a long one. I'll try to make it short a bit because I can go on and on with this. Lady Kishwar Desai is an award-winning author, playwright, and historian. As an author, her sixth book, The Longest Kiss, The Life and Times of Devika Rani, recently received an award from the President of India for the best book on Indian cinema at the National Film Awards, and is being made into a feature film by a leading studio. Apart from the cinema history, she has been working on a colonial history as well, and her book Jallianwala Bagh 1919, The Real Story, won critical acclaim and led to exhibitions in India, UK, and New Zealand at the centenary of the massacre. She's the chair of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Trust that set up the world's first partition museum at the historic Town Hall, Amritsar, and won 7 awards. The trust has now set up the second partition museum at Dara Shikoh Library in Old Delhi. These are people's museums created entirely through donations and contains documents, memorabilia, and material from the partition of India in 1947, which impacted more than 20 million in the world's largest migration. As a playwright, her play Devika Rani, the Goddess of the Silver Screen, has received standing ovations everywhere that it was staged. Her first play, Manto, on the life and times of Sadat Hassan Manto, won the TAG Omega Award. For the past 10 years, she has been working on various aspects of colonial history, examining areas which have an impact both in the UK and India. She is at present working on a historical biography set in the UK and India, and she has been awarded and recognized for her work in art, history, literature, both in UK and in India. So I welcome Lady Kishwar Desai to Ahmedabad University. And
Absolutely. Before we start, there's just a short film which will give you a little bit of a background. It was created at the time that we opened the second museum in Delhi. Thank you so much. I'll have more to say once the film starts.
No, it's just right.
माना कि मुश्किल है सफर पर सुनो मुसाफिर हो कहीं अगर तू रुका तो मंजिल आएगी ना फिर कदम झुकाए जा रख हौसला कर फैसला तुझे वक्त बदलना है
डरना तो बंदिया रुकना तो बंदिया राह पे चल बंदिया डरना तो बंदिया रुकना तो बंदिया राह पे चल बंदिया बंदिया रे बंदिया बंदिया रे बंदिया राह पे चल बंदिया बंदिया रे बंदिया बंदिया रे बंदिया राह पे चल बंदिया रुक जा रे बंदिया ये रात जरा सी है बात समझ बंदिया कुछ देर ही बाकी है रख यकीन आँखों से बादल आज हट जाएगा चांद तेरी आँखों में बंदिया चल के आएगा
तूने बहुत रख लिया है सबर हाँ अभी नहीं तो कभी नहीं सीने में जला ले आग ना आग बंद कर ही बंदिया अब जरा तू जा
Kind of a glimpse of the museum that we now have in Delhi. But of course, it also gave you a little bit of a glimpse of the museum we have in Amritsar, which is at the town hall. But before I get into any of that, I want to thank everyone, especially Molly, the center that you head, and the rest of your team for having invited me here to give this talk. And of course, very grateful for the university for giving us the space to have the talk as well. So to give you a little bit of the background about this museum and why it was so imperative that we set it up. So a lot of people always ask me this question, but why did you set up this museum? What made you think of it, you know? So I want to tell you that I am the child of two refugees, you know, who crossed the border in 1947. They did not know each other at that time. They had no connection with each other. My mother's father was working in Lahore, and she was a 13-year-old at that time. And my father was in the Government College, Lahore. But the commonality was that they both had to leave just overnight. So my dad had to leave whatever were his plans for his future career, his PhD papers, everything got left behind, his life changed. And my mother had to similarly, her father actually was, he was a leading advocate in Lahore. And he, with very loyally sort of wisdom said, this can never happen. Who has ever heard of this ever taking place, that the country can be divided and we can never come back to our home? So we are going to leave our home the way it is, And we will just go away for a little while because fires were raging all around their house, and they had 3 beautiful girls at home, and they were worried because they'd already received a few threats of what could happen. And also my uncle, who was a younger child at that time of the 3 sisters, he was also there. So with 4 children, they got into a car and they crossed over to Amritsar, which was just across the border. At that time, thinking that they would come back, so they just took 1 small suitcase, and that was it. And my grandmother never got any of her things ever again. So it was a running house that they left behind. And my mother always used to say very poignantly that, her father went back. And because a lot of people did go back after partition. I mean, we have a lot of those stories. Some of them were women who went back because they very determinedly wanted to get their things back, and some of them did succeed in getting some material back from their old homes that they had to leave behind. But my grandfather, when he went, he took a truck with him, thinking that I can bring back some of the things. But when he went, there was already somebody living there. They were migrants who had migrated from India and crossed the border and gone. And he didn't have the heart to tell them. He said they were using our things. They were, everything in the house was being used by them. They also needed to live. They needed a space, just like my grandparents needed it. So he just couldn't ask for anything. He just asked for his library books because he thought that maybe that's not something that they would have wanted. So one of those books was still with my parents when I started working on the Partition Museum. And so they donated that. It was the first donation that came from the memorabilia, which we have in the museum now. So that was the first one which was donated to us, was that book, because it had come with my grandfather who crossed the border. Now, it was a very, very difficult time for all of them. And of course, the whole thing comes up of why did they keep so quiet about it? Why did nobody talk? And we were just discussing that a little while earlier. But prior to that, let me just say, what does being a refugee mean? I think we often forget, because in today's world, this is a term that is used every day in the newspapers. But in those days, in 1947, and we have those headlines and those newspapers in both our museums, in Amritsar and in Delhi. And as a child of a refugee, when I look at those newspapers and headlines which talk about all those millions who were overnight, they lost their families, they didn't know where their parents were, they didn't know where their children were, they had no clue. I mean, people just got dislocated so completely, because I remember the other day somebody was telling me about his mother and who was being forced into a truck. And she said, "Meko chappal to pehenne do na. I don't even have time to wear my shoes." But they didn't give her any time. And so this was the way in which people were shoved into trucks, onto trains, onto whatever they could find at that time. And they had just were told, you have to leave because your lives are no longer safe in the place that you live. We also needed to understand that why did this happen to us? Why did this terrible calamity befall a nation that was actually doing quite well, until the partition, people were doing well. They were settling down into careers, though, of course, they were looking forward to an independence. Many of them did not even know that this partition was going to come. And that is something which, when you go to our museum, you will understand better, because when you go through that whole aspect of how the freedom struggle came about, and alongside how there was a call for partition, but many people that we actually interviewed who lived in remote areas, who lived in little villages where there was no radio, where there was no newspaper, they had no idea that this was going to happen to them, let alone an educated person like my grandfather who did not believe. He knew that partition would happen, but why couldn't we go home again? So their lives completely changed. So suddenly they had to relocate, going back to my grandfather and grandmother and my mom and so on. They had to relocate to Simla. They were like, my grandmother was obviously unhappy, so was my grandfather. But they had little kids to think about. And that was what became the major reason why so many of them never spoke about the partition. There are 2 or 3 major reasons. One reason also was their idealism. They had Gandhiji, they had Nehru, they had all these wonderful freedom fighters of that period whom they believed in. They believed that whatever these leaders were doing was going to be the right thing. Now remember, this is before the age of internet, social media. A lot of the information that was coming out was only through, in a limited means, was reaching the people. So they were not able to comprehend the whole calamity that was going to befall them. And the government of the day, which was at the time the British government, before they handed over to the Indians and what became Pakistan, did not give any information out. In fact, it was except for a few members of the elite and those who were working with the government, most of the ordinary people did not know the dimensions of the partition. They didn't even know which side their homes would go, but they had this belief that they will look after us, that our leaders will look after us. And so the clever thing which the British did was that on the 15th, the two countries, the two nations were announced. And with great fanfare, Mountbatten goes to Lahore, he goes to Delhi, and India and Pakistan, the independent India and Pakistan are created. It is only on the 17th that partition is announced. So nothing is prepared. These are two newly constituted governments in two new countries, you can say, almost in a way, in a manner of speaking, one divided, one newly created. And they had no means to protect their own people from what was going to happen. And the British could not do anything because most of their troops were already departing. I mean, I have seen files lying in the National Archives of the UK, where there are riots taking place, and almost every day the person is noting the riot is carrying on, what should I do, what should I do? And on 15th August, the file is closed, because then they take no further action needed. File is closed. Now it is no longer our problem. This is the problem of the newly independent countries of India and Pakistan. So what happens to the people is that they are so desperate somehow to get to the next stage, get into a home, get their kids into education, get back into a settled life. So these are the many reasons why there was so much silence, because those years when they could have spoken about it, when they could have cried on each other's shoulders, were all spent in trying to re-establish themselves. And believe me, the rest of the country was unaffected. People in the south were unaffected. People in even states like Gujarat were unaffected. It is many of my own, near and dear ones did not understand why I wanted to set up the Partition Museum, because they had no clue what had happened to people in Bengal, Punjab, and many other parts of the country, Kashmir, even Assam, so many areas that were impacted. And now we have just set up a gallery on Sindh, which I'll come to later. So why did I do this? Because, why was I so anxious to set up a museum on the partition of India? Because many of the people that were already in the evening of their lives. When I finally got around it in 2015, when I set up the trust with some friends and family, that's the time when we wanted to have the museum open on the 70th anniversary of India's independence and partition. But the people whose histories we wanted to record, including my own parents, were already like 80, 90, and many of them had passed away. So it was literally a race against time. Many other countries have done this. You have the Hiroshima Memorial, you have the 9/11, you have Apartheid Museum, you have, of course, which was a huge example for us, the Holocaust museums. None of these have been set up without some opposition or some people saying that this should not be done, or it should be done this way, or it should not be done that way. But I think the urgency of the situation required us to just go ahead and do the best we could. So the problems we faced were in 2015 when I wanted to do this. We had no money. This was a trust which was set up with some 10,000 rupees or whatever from my own bank account. And we had no money. We had no place, like no land, no building. We had no collections. We didn't have a single oral history. We didn't have even one donated object. But there was this dream, that somehow we could do it within 2 years. 2015 is when we set up the trust. 2017 already clearly looming in the horizon is our deadline to open the museum. So I think what I learned from this was that if you do have a dream, I know it's a cliche, the universe does conspire to help you, So in a manner of speaking, like-minded people started coming, sort of migrating, if you can say that, towards our small group. And I still remember the first meeting we had, which was a public meeting, to announce that we were going to do a museum. Now remember, no money, no collection, no nothing. But we said that we are going to set up this museum because it's an important part of India's history and heritage, because heritage was completely, both sides in Bengal and Punjab, badly affected. So many migrants that went from here to there, that music, gharanas, everything was like disrupted. The Delhi gharana just, kind of disappeared. So many things happened in Punjab. Lots and lots of people lost not just livelihoods, but lives. So this, and women were one of the worst impacted by the partition. Why were we not remembering them? So many women, at least 2 lakhs of women who disappeared, were raped, whose breasts were cut off. I mean, it was incredible for me that we could have gone through all of this and not remember them, So it needed us to go back in history and look at why did we do this? But then we needed people with us. So we did this gathering at the India International Center, the good old India International Center in Delhi, because I said, at least some of my parents' friends will come, nobody else comes. And they're all members of IIC, and even the people, that room, auditorium seats about 350 people. So the IIC also warned me. They said, why don't you just do it in a committee room? 4-5 log aa jayenge, 4 or 5 people will come for this. It was incredible. 1,500 people tried to get into that meeting, and most of them were young. Most of them came because, so they were sitting on the floor, they were sitting everywhere, and they said, we want to be part of this. I don't know what happened to my grandfather. Why does my grandmother talk to me about this? Nobody in our family wants to say anything about it, and we need to know. So we did a presentation of what we were going to put in the museum so that people could understand how we were going forward, and this is the way that they could help us. What became very helpful for us was the media, because we found that the media, again, comprising largely of young journalists, who had partition stories in their own families, were very intrigued by this whole idea. And so they began writing stories about us. We had, as I said, no money, but suddenly we started getting phone calls. I know, so some people started emailing me, my uncle lives in such and such place. So since we didn't have any money, I used to be a television journalist. I had one camera lying at home, which was still there with me, chota sa video camera. So I would take it and go and record whatever stories I could record. So that began to happen, but then people started donating. We did something at the India Art Fair, a small, so we opened a little booth there to just tell people about what we were doing. That was hugely successful. The who's who of Delhi came, right from Arun Puri to Barkhada. Everybody had a partition story. And we got our first donation from this lady whom I didn't know at all, but she had probably come to buy a painting. She was quite elderly, and she said half her, which we were discussing earlier with a student, half her family was in Pakistan. And she said, we can't meet them, we have to meet them in Dubai. And she came with her checkbook, and she signed a check for 50,000 rupees on the spot and gave it to us, which just about covered all the costs that we had put into getting that small booth. But it helped us. So it's like this, word of mouth, slowly, people started hearing about what we were doing. Then I went to the Punjab chief minister, because Delhi, it was impossible. Where do you get space for a museum in Delhi when you have no money? So you go to the government, and the government says that, okay, we might give you something in Noida, we might give you, but land. So, I've been really worried about this because land is something which can take years and years to construct, and we already had a deadline. So, and then I got letters from people, very kind, donors who said, we have 2 acres lying here, would you like that? But land, I did not. I said, if you have a house, give it to me. But we cannot manage with. You see, there was a yearning. What I'm trying to say is that people wanted to see this happen. And they began to just reach out on email, or whichever way they could reach out to us. And students, young people were the mainstay of all of this. And they were very, very keen that it does happen. So everything was being run out of my home at that time, So people would donate and I would put everything, on one side. So it became, really crowded, my house. All the meetings would take place because we had no money, so we had to do it that way. Slowly, we had an exhibition on the next step was to have an exhibition on the refugee camps of Delhi. Again, to my horror and astonishment, in Delhi, barring few knowledgeable people like yourself, Molly, very few people knew that so many of areas in Delhi started their lives as refugee camps, and nobody had thought about it. So when we went to the National Archives in Delhi and tried to get hold of any material we could, which would actually mark out the refugee camps, there was no such material available readily. So we had to go through files and files and files, which, as I said, mostly was, since we had no money, friends, family, husband, everybody was roped in to do this. And we found old maps of Delhi on which we began marking where the refugee camps were. And then I went to at that time, the Nehru Memorial, it was called. Now it's called the Pradhan Mantri Museum or something, whatever. So so we went there and we got these albums. Nobody, believe me, those photographs were that tiny. These are photographs of refugee camps which had existed in Delhi at that time. So I'm just telling you how difficult it was for us to find the material. So those black and white photographs, we had to blow them up into large pictures so that people could understand and begin to collate. So suddenly we found we had photographs of Mountbatten, Lady Mountbatten, and of Nehru visiting these camps, of other leaders visiting these camps, and so on. So then we did this whole exhibition in Delhi. That was amazing because we had people just coming. When we had a little desk there in the India Habitat Center, it was in the art gallery, and people started walking in, and literally people would come every day. The same 3-4 people would come every day, and apart from that, many others. Media came again, etc. And the ones who were coming every day were people who just wanted to be somewhere where they could go through the experiences that they had been through. They felt a kind of empathy on what they saw on the walls. And these were elderly ladies, elderly men who had never spoken about any of this. But on the walls, they saw their own experience. And that's where the real collection of material began. Because people who came, and I still remember this bunch of young kids came to me and said, please take this. It belongs to my grandmother. Just take it. And I think you saw one of that one of them was a watch, which is still it's kept in that original cover, which says 1947 on it. It records the date their grandfather was shot dead while he was migrating from his village in what is now Pakistan to India. And he was recognized because they were slightly well off in their village. He was the only one who had a watch. So his body was then recovered, and that watch remained locked up in a cupboard. It was taken out, and those kids came and gave it to us and said, please keep this with you, put it in the museum at whichever time the museum opens. So, literally we were overwhelmed with the kind of response we were getting from the people. And this again helped us because then we could go to donors and say that, look, please give us some money because this is, the museum is getting traction, the idea is getting traction. But ultimately, we had to set up a small few galleries. We started in 2016. So that date actually that comes up in that film, I just noticed is wrong. 2016 is when we did a little preview in Amritsar with the material that we had, because we needed to assure everyone that we were going in a particular direction. You know, Partition Museum was still a concept that was a little removed. People are familiar with, you know, if you're doing something on a Raja, Maharaja, if you have a, you know, a lot of bartans or you have some musical instruments, all those things they could understand as a concept of a museum. But what was this Partition Museum that we're talking about? So we set up this small exhibition, again, ran into a lot of trouble because we didn't have the funds for it. So we all donated, everybody in the trust donated some money. And Neeraj was very sweet, the designer. We told him that you will only be paid after the exhibit. I mean, I don't know why people agreed to do any of this. I have no clue. But everybody fell along with the plan. I mean, like, they said, okay, we'll do it. And you won't believe it. We had no money because a lot of it went into the, you know, whatever we had to collect and blow up and all that. So the money, the amount which I needed to cover the cost of the designer was not with us. We had only about 20% of the funds. But then we went to a major newspaper whose archives we were also looking at, Hindustan Times. And we met Ms. Shobna Bhartiya. And I told her, I said, this is what we are planning to do. And they supported. So it just, in the nick of time, when we had to start paying the bills, the money came from them to pay the designer. So this is how tense and stressful this journey has been. But I think what has happened along the way is people have seen in what we were doing is that this is needed because they could see their own stories, their parents' stories, stories of the country, stories of the nation. It's not a museum that belongs to one family. It's not about the netas. In fact, very few of the galleries even mention the politicians of that time. We have it in Amritsar only in the first opening galleries because we want to give, I always say that before a couple gets divorced, you have to know what happens before, what is the prior history of theirs. So in that sense, both in Delhi and in Amritsar, you have only a few of the netas mentioned, but it is a people's museum. And this is something that we stuck with. We said, this is the story of the people. So even in Amritsar, it starts with the prehistory, but then the moment partition is announced, we go into the whole aspect of the migration, what happened to the people. Then we go into the aspect of how did they move, what were the various means with which they had to leave their homes, and then what happened when they sought refuge. And then, of course, the last is the Gallery of Hope. So there are 14 galleries as you'll go. I mean, I've just given you a broad picture, not through all of them. But that is how we set up that museum, but with very limited money, very limited funds. And that's why we are really grateful for everybody who supported us in this, because it did go on to win those 7 awards. And it still remains one of the most popular museums in the country, because I remember when the head of UNESCO, Eric Falt, I think his name is, the last head of UNESCO in India, he had people from the Holocaust Museum visiting him. He called me in and he said that I wanted you to meet them and I want you to know that this, he told me this, I was astonished. He said, it is the best museum in the country. This is what he had to say. So I said, why is that? So he said, because it's a museum where I go in and I get so much information. Most museums I go to, I do not learn very much, but here I learn about the country, I learn about a lot of things. So these kinds of people who were encouraging us, national as well as international, was very important because it's been a very difficult journey. And once we did that, I mean, we are still running Amritsar. It's been 8 years now, still running on donations. And we have 10 rupees ka ticket, which covers some of our costs. We have managed to air condition it. We managed to do the basics to keep it going and look after it. It is heritage, it is our heritage, and that's what it covers. Then I was asked, somebody went to see the museum in Amritsar, And they called me up in the, like, a bureaucrat, who then went on to become the, she was a DG tourism later on. And she said that I have visited that museum in Amritsar, the Partition Museum. I would like you to do a similar one in Delhi. And I don't know, I should have said no, because already it was so difficult to do that. But somehow, I mean, there were so many narratives which were still coming in, and we had no place to house them, nothing, all those thousands and thousands of people who were, like their stories would get left out of this narrative because, so anyway, so she's, again, the same thing. She said, you have to do it the same way that you did Amritsar. We'll give you a building, but you have to raise all the money. And so there we went into, this time my family really put their foot down and they said, don't do this, because you've been through so much. And, thanks to you, the rest of the trust has also been through so much, so leave it, But I think it was a good decision that we went ahead. It is a beautiful building. It's this Darashikoh library building. I don't know if anyone, it was a wreck, by the way, when again, like the town hall in Amritsar, which had no roof and it had like trees growing out of it and stuff like that when it was handed to us by Shri Badal, but then they restored it and then they gave it to us. And the one in Delhi was like a garbage dump, both inside and outside, and it was like in a really bad condition. But they said, we will restore it and give it to you, but then you have to raise the money and you have to do everything yourself. So we did that. And the Partition Museum is now complete in Delhi as well. It has been running now for over a year and a half. It has been running free, actually, because we were waiting for the gallery on Sindh, which was part of the plan, because as you know, Sindh comes in our national anthem, Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, but it does not figure anywhere in this country. There's not even a symbol of Sindh, which is what I think was also the other thing which is astonishing for me, was that there was no sculpture, there was nothing anywhere where a person from Sindh could just go and even lay a floral wreath, that this is for my ancestors, this is what they went through. Because Sindh was entirely left behind. It's now entirely in another country. So we were again fortunate. We had done a kind of a commemoration of Sindh, in the Partition Museum in about, I think, 2018, 2019, just before COVID. And we had just invited Sindhis. We said, we can't pay for your anything, but please, you're invited to the Partition Museum. We'll serve you Sindhi curry. We'll sing Sindhi songs, the Madam Mast Kalandar and all that, and we'll sit and swap stories about your parents. We'll do something interesting. And of course, they're followers of Guru Nanak, so you can also go to the Golden Temple. So we requested them to come to the Partition Museum, and for 2 days, they were together. After that was born this idea that why don't we have a gallery on Sindh? That was a discussion that began 3 to 4 years ago. It was very, very difficult because again, we had to go through this whole thing of who's going to donate, where are the donors coming from, etc. But we were again fortunate that this time we had a collection, that the Sindhi Culture Foundation that's partnering with us on this had been collecting for a number of years to do something with the collection that she has and probably set up a museum or a gallery or something. So she originally wanted me to help her get space in Amritsar. So I said, you can't, sorry, that entire space has now become one big restaurant, opposite us. So you can't go there now, it's all taken up. But I could give you a gallery as part of the whole journey of the Partition Museum. Let's come to a decision that we can have a gallery on Sindh at the Delhi Museum. So that is what has happened. And a very, very beautiful gallery has been now set up. And it's the first and only one in the world again. And we are going to inaugurate it on the 5th of October. And we are very fortunate that the Culture Minister will come and inaugurate it, Shri Shekhawat. It's a very, I think it's a landmark event in my in my humble way, I'd like to put it that way, because we need to remember all these people. I mean, we keep talking about freedom fighters and so on, but I feel that they were also part of the freedom struggle, I mean, this was the condition that had been put. Partition was one of the conditions that was laid on the table that India would get independence. And so those people who quietly left their homes and lost everything are part of that journey and that narrative. And I don't think we should forget their sacrifice, especially those who lost their lives and many. We still get stories in the Partition Museum where people don't know what happened to a particular family member. I mean, they just have no clue. And sometimes they come and tell me, we had an aunt, but I don't know, the last time I saw her was on the railway station. I don't know where she went. So, it's that kind of a frightening overnight dislocation, sort of separation from your family. And I mean, when people, young kids come to work with us, I always tell them that, you cry when you lose your mobile phone, but these were people who lost their entire homes and sometimes families overnight. They had no time to mourn or do anything. They had to just carry on with their lives. So we are really looking forward to those of you who have not visited the Partition Museum in Amritsar or Delhi. Please do come. And I'm really grateful to all of you for calling me. And I'm very, very grateful to all our donors and contributors to both the museums and, of course, to our trust that has stood by me despite all these trials and tribulations. And I just want to end by saying it's probably one of the only museums in the country where thousands of people have contributed. It's not just, 6 rich individuals who have set this up, but we continue to get small and large donations and donations of memories and donations of objects and artworks and all kinds of things. So it is really, when we say it's a people's museum, it really is. Thank you so much.
So open for discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's open for discussion. I'm sure some of my friends along with me here are feeling overwhelmed with our own memories of our own families who have gone through this experience. I don't know what else to say, but yeah, open to.
Yeah, something that I want to know, maybe I want you to elaborate. It's not really in the nature of a question or a debate. So, you've told us about the history of the making of the museum and what really kind of prompted you to. But you are dealing with a very painful memory. Yeah? And you also mentioned something like why people were silent. So people's silence was not only about not remembering, but not wanting to remember. And when you were doing those interviews, I would like you to tell us more about that process of, getting these memories out of people, which they probably had better not been touched. It was like you were actually making their wounds, kind of come alive again. So not wanting a memory to be expressed is not only because it was the refugees trying to, make do with the new life and the struggles of that life, but how mind wants to erase certain memories. So when you were interviewing these people, we would like to know more about these experiences, how difficult it was for you to get those stories out. Was it difficult? Or one example you gave that he was waiting to pour his, pain out, but that is after a lapse of 75 years.
So I'll just, start with this one example that, I just recently sort of connected with. So this is, she's fairly well known. Most of you would know the former Minister of State, Meenakshi Lekhi. So she, in her family also, there is a story of partition. And this is her grandmother. And her grandmother was apparently a very dominating and a very kind of, a strong woman who used to, obviously they used to have a lot of lands and they were doing very well, etc. before partition. And when she relocated here, so she says, Meenakshi, that occasionally she would talk about what happened, but no, children, they're not interested, nobody's interested, everybody goes on with their... But she said that when her memory begins to recount what her grandmother must have gone through, she said it was when we were going to school, early morning. She said her grandmother would wake up early morning at 3 o'clock or something, and she would start doing siapa. You know what siapa is? When you beat yourself, you say, hi, this, that. So she would wake up with that. I mean, like she would start screaming in the middle of the night. They took away everything they've done. Look at, this is much later. This is not at the time. She has, she was probably not aware of any of this earlier, but this was her strong grandmother who withstood everything. But this was something which she would wake up, I'm getting goosebumps when I talk about it, early morning. And it was a memory that just haunted her. That how did they evict me? They didn't give me time to do anything. I just had to leave in Punjabi. She would start screaming in the middle of the night. And Meenakshi remembers that she herself would get irritated because she was still not sympathetic. She was a young kid. And she's saying, why does she do this every morning? I don't get to sleep. I have to go to school, etc. Part of the silence was also that people did not understand. For years, we were not taught anything about the partition, and neither did our family speak about it. So she had no clue. Then she jumps 10 or 15 years later on, 20 years, whatever, when she herself starts working in Purani Delhi. And she starts working with a lawyer who had experienced partition and his family, and he was, of course, a much older gentleman. And he tells Meenakshi, this is what happened in Old Delhi. So, we start our Delhi museum with photographs, beautiful photographs, which are taken of the residents of Old Delhi who have lived there, whether Muslim, Hindu, Christian, who have lived there throughout the partition, before, after, and we've recorded all their memories. So this is what they remember and what they saw. So this lawyer must have been, he is not one of them, but he must have been one person like that. So he told Meenakshi for the first time, she understood, because he says, this is what was happening here in Old Delhi, and this is how the refugees came, and this is how, so then she realized, this is how my grandmother, so I mentioned to you earlier that when I said ke ye jutti bhi pehnne ke liye time nahi diya, that was in this reference, that she did not even have time to put on her slippers. So she used to keep on saying, well, why were the slippers so important? Then he explains to her that those women who came, many of them came from well-to-do families. They used to wear shoes, they were properly dressed, they came from wealthy families, and they would be standing on the road selling something or the other, because they had to feed their kids. And that's what he remembered. And that's when she began to understand what must have happened to her grandmother, and what that entire loss of a home, of status, of everything would have meant to her. And she must have been fairly young at that time, they got married young. So for many women, partition happened when they were still very young. And then suddenly to be homeless, standing on some roadside corner, selling some wares. And so she remembered the shoes. And she said, she would have remembered, and because in Delhi, in Old Delhi particularly, a lot of the women were pardanashi, they were almost like in parda or whatever, and so they wouldn't go out that much. So for them, the loss of slippers was not so important, but for the grandmother, so she found many, it's a simple thing like that, but that siapa that she used to do, that crying and wailing in the morning, is something which haunted her. So now to come to the difficulty. why was it so difficult for all of them? I've covered some of the points earlier, why they did not want their, they also, I know this about my own grandparents because my mother told me that. She said they did not want us to see them unhappy. They did not want the parents because they had such a good life. Haste, khilte, sab kuch, and suddenly overnight you lose everything. So she said, my mom used to always act like it's a holiday, school nahi hai, go play, enjoy yourself. They did not allow the kids to feel for even a moment that they have lost everything. But we have stories where how difficult it can be. This gentleman that I interviewed, this was around, I think he's no more now, or maybe around when we started 7-8 years ago. His mother was in Rawalpindi. They grew up in Rawalpindi. Now, Rawalpindi had the worst riots. This is pre-1947, in March. Actually, the riots started from there. That was the first time that there was serious communal clash. And the women, many of the women were forced, it's horrible to even say it today, and this is what he had to tell me, that his mother and all the rest of the female members were forced to jump into fire, to just kill themselves, so that they were not being... And what regret did he have all these years? The regret was, मैं हाथ छुड़ा के भाग आया. And he cried and cried so much. He said, I left her hand and I came away. She died and I lived. So this is the kind of, so for him to talk about it after all these years was important because it was something that he had been, good ke. And at the age of whatever he was at that time, so, maybe 70s, 80s, I don't remember now because this is a while ago that I did this narrative. So we came across a lot of stories like that. Now, the importance of the oral histories, I'll tell you, there is a gentleman, wonderful guy, whose diary also we have in the museum. He mentions Partition, Aman Kapoor. So he wrote me an email. Okay, so he must have been at that time 92. He writes to me and he sends me an email and he says, you have to come and meet me. I have a lot to share with you. So I went all the way to Faridabad, somewhere where he was staying. And what an amazing guy. Oh my God, he remembered everything crystal clear. He gave me the letters from his friends. And in fact, those letters went viral because BBC picked them up. The friends, he had these Muslim friends and how sad they were that he was leaving. So he had other kinds of memories to share, And he shared that how close we were to each other. We grew up together. He kept in touch with his friends till they passed. And now he cannot talk at all. I called his wife the other day. I said, how is Amanjika? Amar? She said, no, he can't speak now. So the importance, if I had not recorded that story then, and they were so cute. I mean, even his wife is sort of, but they both came to the opening of the museum. They took it as their own personal journey, their own museum, difficult memories. But he just wanted to share. He said, I need somebody to know. And now I know that if I had not done it 8 years ago, he couldn't speak. Last time when I called, he had stopped speaking. He had withdrawn into silence. And so we need to have these memories out there, because very soon, in fact, when you walk around the Amritsar Museum, it's actually, it's an amazing journey, because everybody talking on the monitors, it's like your grandparents are talking to you. They're all elderly, including my own dad, who also passed away last year. And they're all speaking, and you can see those elderly, withered, beautiful faces, many of them not there anymore, And we would have never known what they went through. And some joyful stories also, like my own dad's stories. He had a lot of friends. He was posted in, after partition, he joined the IPS. He was in the first Indian police service. and he was posted in Amritsar. So two beautiful stories, one of which I shared earlier about him marrying a girl from, he got a Maulana or whatever, the marriage rites he conducted. Because he was in the police, he just called a priest and he got this girl, a mullah, and he got a girl from Kashmir married to a boy from Lahore on the border so that she could cross over. But the more remarkable thing which he did was that Lata Mangeshkar came to meet him. She was this young Lata Mangeshkar barged into his office, this young, handsome, that time, dashing police officer. And she came to him and said, "Aapko mere se Rosha sahab ek kaam karna hoga. I want to meet Noor Jahan." Because wo partition ke baad we have lost touch. And she came with a whole, my dad remembers, now I don't remember, there were a few other people from Bollywood, in those, who were accompanying her. And he said that, I want to. So then what he did was, on the border, he organized the meeting. Because, Government College Lahore, he had a lot of friends on the other side who knew him. So it was one phone call, "Acha ji, Noor Jahan aa gayi, there Lata Mangeshkar, udhar kebabs, Noor Jahan brought kebabs, they sat, they sang." And Papa says, we spent the whole day there, bade aaram se, till, it was time for them to go. Those were the memories that people never let go of. So I think there are many sides to this oral histories. You don't only talk about oral histories that we have in our museum, and I think this is partly the fault of the foreign writers, who only talk about communal clashes and things like that. There were many, many oral histories about bonding, about living together, about being friends, about the loss. In fact, this museum we used to call the Museum of Love, Loss and Longing when we first started, because there was so much of that. What we heard was always that longing, "Mujhe ghar jana hai, wo mera ghar hai." Important for people to be able to recognize that, and for families. The other thing which happened, Molly, is that families began going home and digging in their, "Acha nani ka wo nikalo, dadi ka wo nikalo, wo hamare paas wo pada nahi tha udhar ka, wo, she used to, where is that?" So suddenly family archives, after the grandparents told their stories, family archives began to become very important. And that's how so much of our collection was built up. Because people went home and they took out the documents and they took out whatever they could find. Sometimes, so I'll give you another example of a well-known person, Suman Berry, the Planning Commission head. So he's been to the museum, he loves it. His family was also from the other side. And he gave me this little piece of paper on which his dad has described in great details. There's no photograph, but in great detail, the house, the street where they lived. Itna sara unko yaad hai, very important, because that will never be known. Only when we read that will we be able to remember how deep that connection was. We just think, haan, ghar chhod ke aa gaye. It was not that. It was much, much more than that. And so many years later, on this little piece of paper, he writes, okay, so another well-known example is Siddharth Mukherjee, who writes those wonderful books on medicine, the gene, So his sister recently reached out to me, Rano. She lives in Delhi. And so she has been gathering a lot of material on her grandmother, who came from Bengal with very little, just 2, 3, they're just one trunk, one steel trunk, and I think she had 3 sons. So recently, at a graduation ceremony, she shared that video. Her brother starts talking, somewhat the way that I started this also, is that I am the child of refugees. I'm the grandchild of refugees, because his grandmother crossed over. And so I asked her, I said, I want that trunk, because it's very important that we preserve these memories. And unless, we have that documentation, unless we have that oral history in the museum, and believe me, sometimes it's not just painful for the first family. There are certain things which I can't still talk about, what happened to my grandparents. It's just too painful. But I know that someday it will all have to be recorded, So I think it's important. And anyway, sorry, that's a very long answer. I'll just sit down. Yeah. Yeah.
How does these stories of sharing of hope, resilience, and loss form these collective memories, and how these help in the intergenerational loss or pain that we have, the trauma that we have? How does it help to overcome all of that?
The reconciliation process.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, in one word, it is, when you reconcile yourself, that this is what happened, and this is what my parents went through, or my grandparents went through, and definitely I can do better, and then that's where hope comes in, that in my generation, I will not allow this to happen again, or I will maintain my own relations in a way. And it always starts with one person. Sab bolte hain, sarkar ye karegi, sarkar wo karegi, but why? We should also be the same, no? So we should also have that kind of openness, that kind of transparency, be close to those around us, and learn from those stories. There are now many, many stories there, and also inspirational stories. As I said, if you go to the museum, you'll find that those people had no rancor, like no matter what happened to them, including my parents. Some of their best friends remained. I mean, now dad is no more, mom can't speak because she had a stroke, but I'm so glad I recorded her when she could still speak. And so some of their best friends are still across the border. And that's fine. That's how they grew up, and that's what we should appreciate, that these friendships go deep, and nothing wrong with that, So the reconciliation process comes through all of this, about understanding of history. If you don't understand history, as I say, you're condemned to keep repeating it. Yeah.
But can I share a personal story?
Sure, please.
So the story which you shared of Meenakshi Lekhi's, something similar I experienced last year. My wife's grandmother, she is a refugee migrant from Pakistan, I think Gujranwala town or something. She was this very strong lady, the family, a very strong personality. In her last few days, she was in a state of almost delirium and unconsciousness most of the time, but when she used to gain consciousness, so not like Syapa, she used to start shouting, "Mere pyo nu chhad do, mere pyo nu chhad do," and "Raat tonu ki hoya." My Punjabi is not that good, but this is what she used to say. She lost her. They were, killed by a sword.
Yeah.
And this is all she was not recognizing her son, any of the family members in that state, but this is what, so it showcases how deep those scars were of the people who faced those. And thank you for being able to tell the story of so many people. I'm sure a lot of stories are still untold. Felt the need, the compulsion to share her story, because she's one of
Thank
the many
you.
unknown people.
No, but that's it. It's a
She
people.
came all the way alone from
Alone, my God. I wish we could have interviewed her, but maybe your wife may want to share, even in writing, we can keep it on our records in the archives. That would be nice. Yeah. It would be good to know about her, because no, I think it'd be wonderful, because she obviously went through a lot of trauma, and to face it alone. So and one of the first exhibitions we did in that Habitat Center, so there used to be this one girl who would come every day, young girl. I mean, she was only maybe, to me, she looked young, 25, 30, whatever. And she was always hanging around. If I was sitting at the, working, she would come, she would be there. Then I thought, what is she doing, Like after some time I started getting nervous, because udhar jaun koi meeting ke liye udhar aa jayegi, whatever. And she would come every day and look at everything. So one day, I'm sorry, I was just like really upset, because I thought, what is wrong? She's a stalker, or what's wrong with her? So I asked her, I said that, why are you following me around all the time? She said, that my mother was raped during the partition, you know, and I just want to know what she went through, because she never spoke after that. She just became completely silent. And though she lived, she had children, she wouldn't just talk to anybody, she wouldn't share anything with anyone. She went completely mute. So when I walk around here, I'm just trying to understand. So when you're talking, I'm just sitting there and listening. I'm just trying to understand what she could have gone through. So that is the trauma which we talk very often now of our grandparents, you know, what they went through. And nobody understood all those years. And nobody, I mean, no one even now thinks that, you know, they had no access to any psychological treatment. There was no psychiatrist available for them to go and talk to. Their own families were completely disrupted and lost in that whole crowd of people. So if it's happened to you and you're living in a refugee camp, so what's the big deal? I'm sharing with you what you've already gone through. So I'm not telling you anything new. You've suffered, I've suffered, now let's just get on with life. So that became an attitude. I am not sure whether the trauma was ever went away. I know that my grandfather went through a lot of depression during his lifetime, and some of it would have been, you know, linked back to that. So sorry.
Yeah, she's been wanting to ask a
Sorry.
question. Oh. Yeah, so whosoever, I don't know.
I just want to add. So, just sharing again, I come from a refugee family myself.
Okay.
And this whole point that you made earlier also of, you know, women being lost. And now again, you said that there were most of the people didn't really go get any help, psychological help. But I feel that it's the women who were part of the families who came here, who really bore the brunt and absorbed all that trauma that maybe was so unspoken.
Yes. So we have dedicated a whole wall in that room of rebuilding home to women, to women who crossed over and actually showed how strong they were, because some of them became camp commanders. Some of them even, you know, helped other refugee women to re-establish themselves. So please do visit the museum and sorry, who's?
Thanks so much for this talk and for doing the work that you do. I'm from Punjab, actually, and I've been to the Partition Museum in Amritsar, but not the one in Delhi. And I was genuinely very moved by the women's section. And I've also seen the film, the play Jis Lahore Nahi Vekhya Jumya Hi Nahi. So I could very much relate to the story of your grandfather going back.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing all of these very personal moments with all of us in the making of these wonderful projects. But I'm an academic and my job is to complicate the way we think about things. So my question to you is that you mentioned Meenakshi Lekhi's conversation with you, but unfortunately, you know, with all due respect to her, her government has led the project of, or actually denied so much of this collective heritage and these complex histories that we have, and they've tried to flatten them out, right? By, very selective destruction of, be it monuments and certain other things, etc. So how do we in this moment reconcile, and especially because the title of your talk had difficult heritages in it, the state-backed legitimation of certain histories and the delegitimization of certain others. So that's my first question. And then the second question is that I want to understand what efforts you made to also get stories of, Ravinder Kaur's book talks about how like the redistribution of property, for example, was a very caste and class based affair. So what of the histories of, people who were not who are often missing, who often go missing from the record because they're not, in the same circles as all of us. So I just want you to comment on that.
If I can add to, because so you are handling very painful memories. And you think that one of the way was that because you had now so much of material was to somehow, permanently etch it.
No, it started with that. We had nothing when we
You had
started.
nothing, but
We
you
had
started
only
collecting.
the idea that this needs to be in a museum. There needs to be a
Where the
a
memories
place
recorded.
where, no, something a little deeper than that. I think I was interested in having a space where this memorialization takes place. Now, I started without, as I said, with no oral histories, no memories, no money, no nothing, and I got nothing from the government, so I cannot be speaking on behalf of the government or what they do or they don't do anyway. But I'm just saying that as just a ordinary person, I did whatever I could. Now it is up to others who see this is, we've been discussing this all day, that this is a restless museum. There are millions and millions of stories out there. 20 million, you can imagine. Now they're descendants, now they're all over the world. We are constantly being inundated with put this there, put this there. We started with no money, and I am still 50% of my time, I'm a writer, but I have no time to do my own writing because if there is a crisis in the museum, I'm calling up everybody, anybody. It doesn't matter to me who it is. It could be just anyone at all. If they're willing to give me some money, please give it. So, and that happens, sometimes people come to the museum, they give us a check of 5,000 rupees, 500 rupees. We take it because, it can help in some way or the other and the project moves forward. So, there are many areas. Let me make this very clear to everybody sitting here. No museum in this world is complete. There will always be something which will be constantly, even when I write books, one of the things which everybody, but you didn't mention this. I said, okay, fine, I didn't mention that, but okay, now you do an edited version of it and mention it, So my point is, there will be never, there's no person in this world that is complete, there's no museum that is complete, nothing. It's all a journey, it's a work in process. It was a lacuna I felt, whether you agree with me or not. It's something which my trust felt, it is something with the people we interacted with, all the partition survivors. As I said, it's the only museum in the country where there are thousands of people associated with it, be it from Bengal, be it from Punjab, be it from anywhere in the world, and who've donated. So now they believe in it. If they believe in it, it's good enough for me, and they're the ones who are supporting it. So that's my answer.
It's not about the incompleteness, or it's because it's completely arising out of a question, and which was toying in my mind also, because government launched this whole thing of partition ki vibhika.
I have nothing to do with it.
No, you don't have.
I don't even want to go there into that discussion because I started my journey 20 years ago.
No, you're not
before
going to
anyone had even thought of it in the government. And 8 years ago, I managed to get some land. I'm just giving you an idea, all the people sitting around here, that if you want to preserve your heritage, take a step forward. You may not agree with the theme I have chosen, but you can choose any other theme. I'm just giving it as an example. It is not something I want anybody to follow, no sarkar, no person. It was a personal journey that I was sharing of our trust and the difficulties you face along that journey. I'm not a government spokesperson. I have no idea what the government thinks at what time. You please ask them.
No,
Don't
the
ask me.
question is simply that how a museum handles these painful memories, and how do you kind of, save it from the misinterpretations of the same material can be read in so many different ways.
Molly, you are an academic, as are most people sitting here. And we spoke about this earlier as well, that you will always, whenever you visit the Holocaust Museum, you will always run the danger of meeting people who are Holocaust deniers. Now, they could be a Donald Trump, they could be somebody else, they could be someone else. It's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to do the best we can to preserve our heritage. And already we know that so many documents, so many little pieces. If you go to our museum, you will find a letter written by this gentleman, who, well, he's a Sardar in Punjab. He is pleading for him to be reunited with the woman that he had saved, who belongs to another community. And she has now been taken across the border. And I think there was a film that was probably made on this as well. And we have that letter, we have that original letter in the museum. For me, that is a documentation of the time. I'm going to read it with whatever due respect it deserves. So what we've done is as respectfully as we could, with whatever we could, with all the limited means, with all the academic support that we could get, we have set up a museum which comprises of documentation, serious documentation, which has come not just emotional or other documents, but also actual documentation of how the partition took place, which has come from the British Library. As you know, most of the documents are lying there. National Archives, British Library, other places in India, National Archives here, as well as Punjab Archives, Bengal Archives, newspapers. We have done our research and we've put it all there. Now, this was with as much respect as we could, with the limited funds that we could. We've taken a step. Now, somebody wants to take a further step and take it to the next level. Please do. I'm requesting everybody to do that. Just take it to the next level, because we need to keep on understanding what happened in 1947. Because not enough. I mean, when I walk into the National Archives in Delhi, I still find those rehabilitation files. We'll go one day and you'll see there are like reams and reams of them just lying there. And nobody has ever opened them. I told you earlier about the Punjab Archives, where I had to go in. I literally had to open these portals to find documents inside. I mean, this is hard work. This is bloody hard work, where you sit in, and when we got the building, we had no electricity, we had nothing. We used to sit in the heat and work in the dust, both in Amritsar as well as in Delhi. Now, just last month, we managed to get air conditioning, but now I have to raise, guess what? 1 lakh or 2 lakhs a month just to pay the electricity bills. So my worry is that people in this country will forget that particular phase that we went through. If we can give them a space where they can go and just either commemorate or understand or whatever you want to do there. We have thousands of school kids coming, we have thousands of college kids coming, both in Amritsar and Delhi, to just, and we have people coming from, as I said, Cambridge, universities in the US, coming to look at those museums. So I think we have done something. And I'm sure there will be always room to do more. Please do it. It's there. As somebody just offered us, we were discussing that research in the morning. I mean, that book, so we can add that. Even your research we can add. We were just discussing that, I mean, there are so many things which we can do with it. Just take it forward. And now with the Gallery of Sindh, it's going to be fabulous, because all of you have been working in that area for years and years. We'll have a space to talk about it. That's all I can do. I mean, I'm not a millionaire, I'm not a Ambani or whatever. We just run this very small NGO. And that's what we try and do.
I'm just curious about one thing. It's a small point. Maybe not. So do you have any stories from Southerners? I mean, as you rightly said, the South was not impacted by the partition, but Southerners were. Southerners, for instance, we have a partition story.
How nice, okay.
Yes. There were South Indians, I'm sure, in Lahore and Karachi and wherever, who had to leave. My story is in Delhi, actually. My family story is in Delhi. During partition, one of my nannies was murdered. She was killed.
Oh my God.
So I'm just curious, because also I think, of course, Southerners were not as much, in terms of sheer numbers, they could not have been as much impacted as, certainly not. And I think that also adds a certain dimension, that might add a certain dimension.
I think we probably do, because see, I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day, because we get oral histories recorded and they go into the archives, so I'm sure we have stories. I can check up. I'm not, because I was involved when we were setting up the museum. Now that one has been running for 8 years through donations. And the one in Delhi was opened a year and a half ago. And right now, I'm just trying to stabilize this and to run it smoothly. But I'm sure within the archives, we would have stories, because whoever comes, we do record them, or at least we try and get back to them if we have the funds. That's also a very important thing. When you don't have the money, then I just tell them, look, can you hang in there for a little while, or just record it on your phone and send it to me, because we are also conscious that time is running out for a lot of people. So if you can just record it and send it to me, then, at least it'll get done. But sometimes we honestly don't have the funds to do it. So, but we do have stories which are representative of most parts of the country. But I'll check up on that and get back to you.
This is probably the last one.
Yeah.
So as a head, I wanted to ask, when setting up the museum, were there any conflicts among the communities involved due to the sensitive nature of the partition and the differing views and perspectives? And how did you, what kind of approaches can be employed or used to engage with difficult heritage so that we can minimize further harm or division?
So I think one of the things that happened to me was that, I'll just put it in another way, is that you have to be sensitive about countries telling their own stories. So when we were setting up the museum in Amritsar, and I also, as I told you, I also, live abroad. So somebody there got in touch with me and said, can you just look into setting up a similar one in Pakistan? So we said, my first reaction was that, look, each country must tell its own story, because it was a division of India, but it was a creation of Pakistan. So there will always be a differing point of view. So let them do it in their own way. Why should we, we've been colonized for years and years, certain narratives have been drummed into our heads. Now we need to clear out those narratives and tell our own stories the way we want to tell them. So I think there has to be respect for all concerned. And I think if you just move forward with that respectful attitude, and good things will happen. It will work itself out. So long as, so I think that's what we've tried to do, just remain respectful to all communities concerned, remain respectful to all countries concerned. So we were also asked to, work together with Bangladesh earlier, but then now the narrative here has completely changed. So, how do we deal with that? And something else needs to be done, and they will tell their own story in their own way.
We can wind up if you allow me.
Yes.
So just a quick comment. I've gone a little late. I'm so happy that you started this museum in time, because we have the original narratives of the people who were part of it. Because I think in a few years we'll only have
most of them are gone. Yeah.
So I'm so glad.
75 years already. Yeah.
I was there at the museum some time back, and I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Happy to see you.
It's a good affirmation. Thank you.